For this presentation, we're going to discuss the theoretical perspectives on human behavior. This presentation is a very brief overview of the basic premises of each of the 8 theoretical perspectives covered in your textbook. I will also describe how each theory might explain human behavior with an example and describe how the theory may be applied in actual social work practice. Understanding these theories will be very important for your first paper since you will have to select 2 theories and be able to apply them to your case study. You need to carefully read chapter 2 of your textbook and review the guidelines of your theory to a case paper. You are going to be working on a journal this week, which is going to help you get started on your assignment, and I will be providing feedback next week. I also suggest that you save these and other assignments in this class because they may be helpful for your comprehensive exam next year. And this particular assignment will be particularly helpful for your comprehensive exam. So first, we will start off with systems perspective. As you know, individuals and families are part of various interacting systems, including family, church, education, healthcare, social networking. So, as social workers, we have to recognize these relationships and interactions among various parts of the system in order to understand human behavior, since behavior is affected by these interactions. And the use of systems perspective and social work can be in the applications of genograms and ecomaps. So the one at the top is an ecomap and it helps illustrate systems and relationships that are part of an individual's family or environment. And the genogram, which is located below, shows the close or open relationships or pattern of relationships among families, such as between grandparents to grandparents. And these are things that you might do in order to help your client. You might work with them together to map out the relationships and use as a visual to show what type of relationships might be present or what type of relationships may be an issue. So a closed system is an isolated relationship from other systems. An open system interacts with other systems. So you may find concerns with a family that may be isolated from other systems, and you may work with this family to help develop an open system or supports to help them address their needs. The genogram may also help families recognize harmful historical relationships or patterns that they want to break. Then we have the conflict perspective. The basic premise of this perspective is to recognize inequality and the structure that promotes inequality. So, as social workers, we must consider oppression and discrimination that may be part of your client's life because behavior is affected by these situations of oppression and discrimination. And we must also recognize that behavior is affected by competition for scarce resources. So consider, for example, how poverty and discrimination can affect human behavior when you are working with clients. And the application to practice can be found on the meso and macro level more than at the micro level, with the idea that you will be helping mobilize oppressed groups. And also at the micro level, it is also really important because you need to recognize and discuss intersectionality or intersecting factors such as age, gender, immigration status, and race, and how these impact your clients, and also how you can empower these populations. What do you think of the example from the video that you watched last week of Sin País? The clients in that situation, they face different intersecting factors, including, for example, race and ethnicity. So they're Latinos and they're impacted by their immigration status. So you can also think about, so for example, um, the parents, they're undocumented, um, and the youth, one of them is undocumented and the other one is US born. So as you can see, there are different intersecting factors that you need to take into consideration. Even like, for example, if you're working with a white female, there may be different levels of oppression that they may experience depending on their socioeconomic status. So if you're working with someone from a higher socioeconomic status, they may experience more privilege compared to, for example, someone who comes from a lower socioeconomic status. Even if they're white female, they may experience more oppression, particularly, for example, if they're a single mother and don't have a lot of resources and they have to work to provide for the basic needs of their children. Next, we have exchange and choice perspective. The basic premise is that consideration of role of resources and people weight costs versus rewards and are motivated by self-interest. So this theory applies in practice by helping clients find ways to increase capital of clients, specifically financial capital and other financial resources. Um, so, as social workers, it is important to find and propose policies that incentivize behavior that is good for everyone, for both the community and the client. So, for example, we can help build programs called individual development accounts. Through these type of programs, cash is given to low income people, and they are matching programs, which means that money is given in a ratio amount to what they save. So, for example, it can be $2 for every dollar that the client saves. So, if a client saves $1, then the matching amount is $2. So, at the end of the day, the client has $3. And these type of programs are often restricted for a specific type of purposes. So, for example, they can be restricted to purchase a home, to start a new business, or to help the client further their education. So, at the macro level, you can advocate for funding for these type of programs that provide direct cash flow or for low income populations. Next is the social constructionist perspective, and the basic premises are to consider are the role of meaning that is ascribed to words and symbols. So there's no single objectivity or objective reality, but instead there are many subjective realities. So people behave based upon their subjective reality, which has been shaped by their particular experience and the way that they interpret social interactions. So applying this to practice, you should start where the client is because it might be a completely different perspective that the client have from what you see as a reality. And then we have also narrative therapy, which is based on this perspective, and it is used by social workers um, and helping people tell their story and consider how their version of reality was constructed and maybe exploring alternative interpretations of their story or life. Then we have psychodynamic perspective. The basic premises are the importance of internal drives, processes, emotions, and the unconsciousness. Childhood experience, impact, attachment. So this comes from Freud. We have the theory of the mind, which describes the preconscious, conscious, and unconscious. And we have the stages of psychosexual childhood development, which were important to Freud. And from these theories, there have been a number of theories that have developed. And the application to practice from this perspective relies on the exploration of the self by the client and professional together. And the intervention involves is more exploratory in nature, so it's non-directive. The developmental perspective, the basic premises is that the consideration for development over the life course through common life challenges and transitions. So the developmental perspective is also rooted in Freud's five psychosexual stages that I briefly mentioned in the previous slides. But there are a number of developmental stages that came after Freud's, and these will be further explored in the second part of this course in the spring. And again, the basic premise is the consideration of development over the life course through common challenges and transitions that occur in certain stages of development. So, for example, this could include puberty and graduation from high school during adolescence, um, having to raise children in early adulthood, and then retirement and end of life. So, these are certain challenges of people going through those times in their life. And your role as a social worker is to help the client identify where they are in the life cycle and their personalized resources that may be available to them depending on where they are at. So, for example, grandparents raising grandchildren, and you need to offer comfort and support found in shared struggles. So, an intervention developed based on this perspective is the idea of support groups. So this is where the idea of support groups came from, the developmental perspective, that people can be part of a support group to support each other on specific challenges or transitions that are common and that they're going through. Then we have social behavioral perspective. This comes from the premise or notion that we know how to behave based on rewards, punishments, stimulating other people, and our beliefs and what we can expect. Learning takes place through our interaction with our environment. So, the application to practice is a concept of self efficacy. So, professional work from this perspective focuses on helping the client gain self efficacy or a sense of competence. So, the idea that clients can accomplish their particular goals. And a type of therapy that comes from this perspective is cognitive behavioral therapy, which focuses on encouraging clients to consider their thought pattern and how they may lead to unhelpful or unhealthy behaviors. And then the social worker or therapist works with a client to create new ways of thinking, which can lead to new behaviors. Finally, we have the humanistic perspective. The basic premise for this perspective is the importance of a human's search for meaning, and this is rooted in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is provided on the image to the right. The idea is that needs at the bottom of the pyramid must be met before the ones at the top can be met. So, we have the physiological needs, which are the basic needs, including water, food, shelter, and sleep. After that, after we have the basic needs met, we need to feel safe, we need to have an employment, we need to have good health in order to get to the point where we can successfully have friendships, intimacy, and a sense of connection to others. And then you can move up your way to having respect, self-esteem, status, recognition. So you can become the most that you can be, which is the self-actualization. So the role of social workers and this using this perspective is to offer empathy and genuineness to the client with a focus on the client's strength and helping them promote or achieve the highest level of functioning for the client. So, positive psychology comes from this perspective. It fosters optimism, purpose, and a drive to reach self identified goals together with the client while keeping in mind the client's potential for growth. So, the presentation was a brief rundown of the eight different theoretical perspectives, but you will need to dig into your textbook, which covers the theory more into detail. I hope these slides helped you to make some connections between theory and practice, because it is important to recognize that we just don't try different interventions for the sake of them, but we use a theoretical perspective that is developed or considered, like the ones that we went over today, and then a practice intervention is considered, and then it's tested through research to see if it's effective, and we use techniques as social workers. So through the paper, the case or theory to application of the theory to a case, we will be describing a client and their behaviors. And you're going to be choosing two of the eight theories to explain their behaviors and briefly describe how you might intervene. So you will need to be very familiar with this chapter of the textbook, and I really suggest that you look at the outside sources to expand your two theories that you would choose to describe your client's behaviors. So you can use developmental theory, for example, to describe the behavior of a client who's dealing with a terminal illness later in life. And this client may also experience difficulties reaching self-actualization due to basic needs not met, such as not having housing, for example. And this second explanation may come from the humanistic perspective. So you would choose the developmental and humanistic perspective together, and you would need to further, obviously for this, we would need to have further information about their background, but this is just to give you an idea. So please don't hesitate to contact me